Earthquake risk.
Earthquake risk. So think of it like weather forecasting, only weather forecasting looks out a few days. Earthquake forecasting looks out a few decades. So the forecast is this. There's an 84% chance we'll see another Nisqually type earthquake over the next 50 years. That's in a magnitude 6 range, but deep down. So you can pretty well bet that the tunnel will go through at least 2 of those. Then there's a magnitude 9 subduction zone earthquake along our coast, and the risk of a shallow crustal fault on the Seattle Fault and the South Whidbey Island Fault. Each of those about a 15% chance each in 15 years. The tunnel designed to take all of those risks into consideration.
Earthquake. Earthquake. That's a serious earthquake.
The Nisqually Earthquake, February 28, 2001, a deep magnitude 6.8, 30 miles down. It rattled the region.
It was pretty strongly felt here at the lab, and we did suffer some minor damage to piping as well as ceiling tiles.
The lab in this case is the Washington State Department of Transportation's Materials Lab in Lacey. What they test here includes the ability of dirt to hold up the state's infrastructure, the roads and the bridges.
And it's currently doing a test, or it's being calibrated for a test?
Right now there's a sample in there. We're in the saturation phase, and so this will continue to saturate for probably about a 4-hour period.
Jim Struthers is the chief engineering geologist for WashDOT. This test is looking at liquefaction, what happens to soggy soil during a quake. Like the name implies, it goes from a solid to a liquid when shaken and will no longer hold things up. It's that liquefaction risk which led WSDOT to produce this animation back in 2009. It's intended to be a close approximation of the viaduct's vulnerability sitting in that wet soil, which would also slide into Puget Sound through the old vulnerable seawall designed to keep it in place. That seawall has now been fixed. The viaduct hasn't.
Really, the animation was our attempt to, as accurately as possible, using the science, portray the effects of the earthquake.
If we can get through the next few weeks, we may never have to watch this scenario play out for real, with traffic rolling over it. That's the viaduct. What about the tunnel replacing it? Why will the tunnel do better?
When you look at an individual segment, it's a fairly massive piece of concrete. But at the scale of the diameter of the tunnel, there is quite a bit of flex in there. And so the approach that was taken for the tunnel was to actually simulate real earthquake ground motions coming into that structure at different nodes and actually check its flexibility during the type of earthquake you would expect.
The tunnel is designed to be flexible, but underground, the same earthquake would not cause the same kind of shaking you would see at the surface. First, the soil most of the tunnel runs through is tougher stuff, compressed by heavy glaciers during the Ice Age, not the loose fill that surrounds the supports holding up the viaduct. Second, the tunnel would move with the shaking, where the viaduct would sway, breaking its joints and falling apart. For the viaduct, it's also a height problem.
If you're up on the upper deck of the viaduct, you're seeing a lot more deformation than you would be seeing inside the tunnel itself.
Then there's this. When driving through it, we'll think of it as one tunnel, but there are actually 2. There's the bore, the part dug by Bertha the tunneling machine, the part with the rings. Then there's the cut and cover tunnel, also known as the portals, constructed more like a building. And this big rubber joint insulates one from the other when the shaking rolls through.
Right at the joint between those, where you have the bored tunnel and the portal, there's actually a joint that accommodates any motion that would be expected by the earthquake. And that was something the designers put a lot of time and effort into. I think it's probably one of the more critical elements of the design.
But not everything associated with earthquake resistance is underground. One of the long bridges that supports a major ramp leading into downtown is actually a test, a first of its kind, flexible bridge. It's built with special metal pins made from a nickel titanium alloy that can remember their shape before the quake.
And once you unload it, you let the load go, it goes back to its original place as though nothing has happened.
Surrounding the pins at the joint, there's a special concrete that acts more like flexible rubber. The tunnel is built with what we know about the science of earthquakes today, but science is always evolving. For now, the tunnel is state-of-the-art.
Does that make the tunnel quake-proof?
You know, quake-proof is an interesting term. I don't think really anything is quake-proof.
One question I had is the tunnel's vulnerability to a tsunami. Could the tunnel flood? Well, WashDOT took that into consideration as well when they designed it, saying the lower south entrance should still be above the level of a tsunami, the portal high enough to stay out of the reach if that was generated by a wave in Puget Sound. So we don't expect a tsunami from a coastal earthquake to get all the way in here, but we know that the Seattle fault, the South Whidbey fault, could potentially generate a local tsunami.
So a lot of the earthquake risk has been taken into consideration. Have we touched every possible risk here?
We've touched every possible risk. They've examined all of that for the state, like I said, the state of the art now.
Yeah.
But remember, when they designed the viaduct, they weren't really paying attention to earthquakes. Now we're paying attention to earthquakes, but the science is still out there. They're looking for more faults. They're finding older faults. Are they still active? What's their interval? For example, the Seattle fault, while considered very dangerous, last one off about 1,100 years ago, they don't know how often it recurs, and that's kind of a problem. Is it done? Is it not done? Is it 2,500 years apart? We don't know. But we want to open up the floor when it comes to questions from you. What do you want to know about the viaduct closure and a new tunnel? Text us. The number is 206-448-4545. We'll be back around 5:30 to answer some of your texts live.
Wow, good information.
Yeah.
Thank you, Glenn.
Lots of questions out there. Thanks.